Hi, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Company, and we're going to talk today about how you can double your sales, and we're going to talk about how the mind, your mind, can either help or boycott that process. So please go to the show right now and listen to the full episode.
And hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both, a clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic. Hello and welcome back. Beate Gillette here, the Growth Architect. Today, I am going to talk about something that a lot of you love to hate, hate to love, and that is sales. But we're going to take a completely different spin on it because we are going to talk about why a lot of you are not comfortable with selling, why so many of you are nervous about rejection, and what it all means and how we can solve it. And with me today is Doug Brown from CEO Sales Strategies, and he is the authority on the subject. Doug, I am fired up. Let's do this.
Thank you, Beate. It's wonderful to be here, and I love the subject matter. So you might find this interesting. We were just going through our podcast subjects in a meeting earlier, and the number one thing that came up is our topic today. It was the most sought after requested topic. So I'm glad we're doing it on your podcast on this subject. So thank you.
I love it. So why don't we go and introduce you to our audience, to our beehive, and talk a little about who are you and what do you solve for your clients?
All right, who am I? Well, that's a long subject.
How much time do we have?
But you know, I'm a guy who had to learn how to sell at a very early age, and starting at age 5.5, you know, in my dad's business. And I really didn't realize that selling was actually a profession until I got to be in my late 20s, and where I really took what I would call my first sales job. And now what I do is I teach people how to double their sales. I teach people and companies how to double their sales. And usually that's working with the sales team or working with the individuals who sell. And my life has been a myriad of ups and downs of fun and happiness and tragedy and triumph, all in the same. You know, when it comes to selling, we all don't have good, even when you learn it, you still have some days where you're like, well, this was a fun day, you know, but that's part of the process. And so that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I've been on your podcast that's all about sales. So we had wanted you to be on the show because I do believe that the topic of sales comes up all the time. And can I just ask this question sort of in the broadest possible way? What is it about sales that people have such a hard time with?
Rejection and their personal inner feeling about themselves. And they tie the two together, that one is the same. That's what I think that most people have the biggest challenge with, because they don't realize that sales is a process and that you're going to fail. And so when you do fail, if you take it personally as that's me as the person, then it becomes hard, right? Because we all don't want to look that way at ourselves that way. That's what I found to be the hardest thing about selling for most people. The second hardest thing, which I think ties in, is they really don't know the rules to the game. So they're playing a game without the actual steps and stages and rules that should be played. And that's a tough one. I'm not a good dancer, but if I didn't understand the rules of the dance, I'd be stepping all over your toes. And eventually you might look at me and say, Doug, stop doing that, right? Knowing you do that right away. So it would be...
I'm actually practicing the father-daughter dance with my husband right now, whose daughter is getting married. And I have been through that exact same thing over the last 5 weeks. And I'm just going to throw this in here because I think you're going to probably be able to take that and run with it. So the way he wants to learn, he wants to watch the video of the dance because he wants to logicize what the feeling of the dance is by watching it, which to me, you know, and I used to compete in ballroom dancing back in the days. To me, that is ludicrous. Is you have to dance to feel what it feels like to dance. So if I extrapolate this into sales, can I read the sales books? Can I watch the videos? Or do I actually need to be on the phone?
So all of the above, right? So just as you were saying, he has his method to start to learn to feel safe, right? And this way it's watch videos. So some people will prefer to do something like that. And then they'll say, well, when I feel a little more comfortable at that, then I'll get out live on the floor, where you're perfectly comfortable being live out on the floor. I personally would love to be live on the floor first and then watch the videos, because now after I've stepped all over your feet, and then look at it and go, how do I not do that again, right? So we all have our dominant ways of learning and our dominant ways that we like to present ourselves. And that in selling can get you in trouble. I was just having this conversation with my daughters the other day, because somebody's coming through there very methodical. And the way, it was my youngest daughter's college professor. She's like, you've got to write 60 pages on this topic because a CEO would want to hear 60 pages on this topic. And they're all like, that seems a little excessive. And she's like, no, it's not. And I asked my daughter, I said, is she, a few questions. I said, is she extremely methodical in her approach through life? And she's like, oh yeah, constant. Like, we're just talking about methodology and numbers and sequence and steps. I said, so that's called buyer's bias. And so she's selling you on the idea that she believes that a CEO has to have 60 pages. But I can tell you from myself being in that position running companies, I would never read 60 pages. In fact, if somebody brought me 60 pages, I'd be like, we're done. This meeting's done.
Oh, right? Not a chance in the world.
So we all have different learning types. And when we're selling to those learning types, that the person who likes to learn a certain way, and it's usually in language patterns that we can tell, then, it's just communication. So, he likes to watch videos to feel safe. You like to get out on the floor to feel safe. There's a middle ground, but we have to try all ways to probably master the dance, so to speak.
So I want to talk about first the strategy part, and then I want to go into sort of the more spiritual and the trauma part in the second part of the show. So from a strategy perspective, how do I find out what my own method is to make me more comfortable with sales? Because if I go to a particular sales trainer, they say, don't believe anybody, but believe this. And if I go to another sales trainer and say, oh, that's just nonsense. It's all about the tonality. Then I go to somebody else and says, oh, no. It's the script, baby. You got to hammer down the script. How do I know which of these methods will resonate with me? You're laughing.
Yeah. It's confusing, especially when one doesn't know, right? So the short answer is what feels best and right to you. So there's a really good book called Sales Dogs. It's written by Blair Singer. And it explains that a breed of dog is equal to somebody selling. And there's numerous breeds of dogs. Some people sell like the Chihuahua. Some people sell like the Pit Bull. Some people sell like the Labrador Retriever, right? And I like the book because it drives a point home that we're all individual and we're all unique. And so the way we want to learn is one thing. The way we want to communicate, that's a different thing, because now you brought up the word script. The challenge I have with scripts, when they're so tight, the other person doesn't know the script. Mm-hmm. So we must be able to be fluid within their language of communication. And that's all selling is. Selling is communication. That's where people get, they're like, well, geez, you got to persuade. No, you really don't. You don't. We find a problem or an opportunity for the future that somebody's looking for. If we, as the seller, can fulfill that, we have a match. That's it. That's sales, right? Now, where it gets a little more complex, which I think we're going to get into the second part of this, is people have feelings and they have fears and they have, desires. But when we're not playing win-win in the selling process, that's when the sellers then can go and try to persuade and manipulate to the point of persuasion, right? And that's where people go, oh, I don't like that type of salesperson, because who does? I don't like them either. And unfortunately for them, I'm very skilled at this. So when I see it coming, I'm like, oh, please don't use an alternate choice close with me. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this or that. Or please, don't use an assumption close, because you probably learned this from Tom Hopkins, or you probably learned this from whatever, right? So But most people don't study this in and out every single day. So the reality is that communication can be used for greatness. It can be used for evil, right? We all know this. Some guy comes up to some girl and uses a cheesy, stupid line, and it's like, well, you're not using it for good. Even if so our intention has to be the first thing that we ask. So if somebody is learning something from somebody, does it resonate with our intention? Because if it doesn't, cut it loose. Or if it doesn't, then you can study it, but only take the parts of what works for us, our own individual. Because we're building our own personal dossier of how to sell, but we have to be authentic and congruent with ourselves. Otherwise, what will happen is we'll get into situations that will challenge us. And what will happen is people won't know how to respond. So it's that classic deer in the headlights, or worse yet, you get an objection. Now you're just starting to crush it because we don't know any other way of handling it. So learning it's one thing. And then, as you said, getting on the dance floor. I'm a terrible dancer. I will admit that right now. I'm terrible. You could teach me lots of things in dancing and you'd be like, Doug, move your body this way because your partner's going to want to go that way because you're experienced at those things. And so I'd become a better dancer communicating with you, right? We will become better salespeople communicating with other people. And the more people we communicate with, the more we're going to understand that, oh, this person sort of falls into this kind of pattern. So this is the type of dance that works best with them.
Yeah, and I want to jump in here and I want to cite like an example that literally just happened. So I'm on LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn now, I think that there must be somebody who's selling like nuts to fitness trainer this LinkedIn lead generation machine. I'm sure you, because out of nowhere, I have like fitness after fitness trainer who works with high level executives just like me to help me to feel the best in my body, nutrition, health, and fitness wise, right? So this guy comes and says, well, hey, I'm taking my wife to Los Angeles and it's a special occasion. Would you happen to know like a really great steak restaurant? And I know this is a pitch. I know exactly where we're going with this, but I'm thinking it actually is unique, right? I have not heard that one before. So I'm willing to play here. So I said, well, you go to Maestro on the Pacific Coast Highway, which overlooks the ocean. Or if you really want to spend some money, you go to Joffrey's, which is where all the celebrities go. Inevitably, the next email is, thank you so much. I want to return the favor. That's classic sales script. This is, by the way, not a sales call. I just want to, do a free 15-minute assessment. And I'm thinking, it's the predictability of this that is such a turnoff. If you have a good opening hook, right? What do you tell people that if they find a good opening hook to not fall into this trite, this is not a sales call, the free assessment, the strategy piece, because I think that's what everybody's doing right now. That's what we're doing, right? We do offer these consultations, strategy calls, we call them uncovery sessions, opportunity assessments, whatever you want to call it afterward. But how do I take something like this and I make it so it's not cheesy or I appreciate a good sales pitch. I really do. But if it's bad, sometimes I tell them, I said, dude, that was horrible.
So part of the challenge when people are learning sales or learning to sell is they have no training, right? Because a lot of companies, they don't do training. It's like, my sales team's terrible. It's like, let's look at the leadership down, right? Because there was no training, right? So they're making it up as they go along. So that's number one. Or they're having training, but they're not having the right training. Again, let's go back to the fundamentals. Boy meets girl. If boy is truthful with girl, girl will think he's truthful. If boy is not truthful with girl, she may think he's still being truthful, but then discovers he's not. End of relationship in most cases, right? Mm-hmm. So, girl's not truthful with boy. At least a problem, I can tell you that in the relationship, right? And usually end of relationship, there's no difference here. And so Truth and transparency. That person who just did what they did is a classic bait and switch, right? I'll call it steak and switch because they use steak as the origin. My kids
I
would.
like it. You made that up on the fly. Bravo.
Thank you.
The steak and switch. I should reach back out to him and tell him I just talked to Doug Brown and he calls it the steak and switch.
It's like, but if he had have come to you and just been truthful and transparent and said, look, I'm looking for two things. Number one, I'm looking for a great restaurant take my wife to, and I think you might know. I'm also looking for clients, right? If he had just been straightforward, you would have had one of two things. One, you would have said, these are the greatest restaurants I think you should go to. And B, I'm not interested in talking to you about this.
Because my son-in-law is a certified fitness trainer, helped my daughter to lose 50 pounds after her baby, and is in PT school. I'm covered, thank you.
So in that case, it's a no bueno, so to speak. Look, when we look at leads, and this is where I think a lot of this comes in, but I'll finish this and then I'll go to the lead thing. So if he had been truthful and transparent, he might have been able then to ask you for referrals to who you think, if he was specific enough for your referrals, and assuming, the member you just mentioned wasn't doing that, he might be able to get a couple of referrals out of that if he was truthful and transparent. The challenge is people don't have enough leads. The challenge is they don't have enough opportunities. And so what they do is they start to get scarcity mindsets going on. That scarcity mindset kicks in, and then they go, okay, I'll try these, which I consider cheesy methods as well, right? And this is the ultimate in illustration. It's not in very good taste, but I love this study. And Boston University did a study. There were two guys who said, you know what, I'm going to go out in the middle of the summertime. I'm just going to walk out in Boston. I'm going to walk up to the ladies. They don't know us. And I'm just going to say, hi, my name is whatever. I would love to go to a hotel with you right now. Can we go? Now, these were psychology majors inside sociology, so they're studying this stuff, right? To see the reaction. And I saw your reaction, you recoiled and you're like, what the heck? Really? They had, brawn enough to go do something like this. But here's the thing. They actually got some takers. They actually got some women who said, yes, I'll go. Okay. They were truthful and transparent. Now, I'm not saying, folks, go do this with your prospects in this capacity. Okay. I'm not suggesting that at all.
I call this showing up on the first date naked. That's in LinkedIn, that is the worst strategy. And I literally call it the showing up on the first date naked strategy. I as you said, it can work.
It's not a good approach either.
And certainly not for longevity.
No, but I wanted to illustrate the point that they did get some yeses, right?
Yes.
Because they were prolific enough in their prospecting. So they got very low positive response rates. But to their credit, they went out and they talked to everybody. So they were playing the wide number game, right? So when we look at a lead, we want to classify that lead. We will have some leads as indifferent, which means, hey, doesn't matter what you're talking about, they're not interested.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with that the vetting is really misconstrued in the sales process on where the vetting really comes in. And I think a lot of this has to honestly do with internet marketing and online sales, where this whole dilemma of running as many people through the process as quickly as possible to weed out immediately who even has potential, and it's just bad sales conversations, gives really everybody a bad rep, and it makes people feel bad because they can't replicate this insanity that is being done where they only want vetted qualified candidates in their calendar so they can close. Anybody can close if you have vetted qualified candidates.
Well, and that's a beautiful way of saying it, right? The more skills that we have, as long as they're used appropriately, will give us a higher conversion rate. But anyone who has qualified sales ready or sales qualified people can have a conversation and will get a decent close rate out of the process. And by the way, going mass like that is expensive as a lead cost for people. And that's the other thing they don't tell these people. Oh yeah, you're gonna need, I didn't tell you need $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a month to actually.
Try 50 right now with the algorithm change. We know that people are spending, unless you have at least $10,000, expect nothing.
And a lot of people don't have that, especially when they're solo sellers or they're trying to get off the ground in some type of business. And the other thing is it takes months to dial that in most cases, right? Even with a budget, it takes months to dial it in. So you're going to burn off $20,000 or $30,000 likely
Easy.
just to dial it in. So, my philosophy on selling has always been, let's look at what works offline and adapt that to online versus what works online, which by the way came from offline, but they try to make it seem like it doesn't. It's like this new thing, right? Because you can utilize certain online technologies to do things quicker, faster, and less costly than we could in the old days in offline, right? In the old days, we had focus groups to figure out who our ideal client buying profile is, right? I mean, now I developed a software. We can do this in a few hours and we're done, right? But there's other softwares out there too. The reality is though, if we try and book a week full of 40 or 50 or 60 calls and we're getting one close out of 50, that is a really messy way on our psyche, right? So it's like the old days of making cold calls. Make 100 cold calls a day, and you get 2 appointments type thing, right? I mean, there are companies out there that we like, yeah, well, I'll be happy. You get 2 appointments, because you got 10 appointments. Out of those 10 appointments, we're going to close X%. Well, that's great.
It just becomes a numbers game. I want to switch though what you just said about, because this is a great segue for us to go really into the second spiritual aspect of it, the mindset portion or the fear of this. So are you saying, Doug, that if I look at sales from this numbers perspective, it's almost like I have no choice but to traumatize myself feeling bad about sales? Because that's what I just heard you say.
I think if you look at it from a numbers perspective of how I was just talking about on the cold call side of it, then we're immediately putting us in a position where
I got anxiety you just saying that, because I'm, in my mind, I'm like 100 calls and then 2 appointments. Jesus, to get to 10 appointments,
it's a hard road to go. But if you know how to make cold calls appropriately, it's not 100 to 2. Right? For example, I can do 15 calls, catch 3 or 4 people, and usually end up with 1 or 2 appointments, right? Because it's a different conversation. I just had a call that came through the other day, and it was immediately, "Hi, Mr. Brown. How you doing today?" It's like, okay,
Oh God,
we've got a cold call.
Is this a good time? Can I? For me, I always know because I don't know how to pronounce my name. Hi, can I speak to Betty, Bertha, Beatty?
See, it's a good screening mechanism for you on those type of calls, because it took me a while to even learn your name, right? But yeah, and I get like, sometimes people will come through and they'll call me Doug C, right? It's like, C's my middle initial, right? So it's like they're reading off a sheet, and we know that, and that's fine. I'm very kind to these people because I know what they've gone through, because I've made 100 phone calls a day, right? I know what it feels like. So it's not a very efficient way of doing things unless you're very effective at it. And we can be effective at it once we know the skill set. But again, we've got to dial in that client profile and that ideal buyer. So, but to answer your question, yes, I mean, if we run our business by the numbers in the wrong way, it will create anxiety and stress. If we run our business by numbers that tell us information to help us get better, it actually will reduce our stress. If somebody has a lot of leads and then they're going higher on the lead count, but they're not getting any better response rate, I can concretely tell them it is in one of 2 things. 1, the quality of lead they're going out after isn't interest, it's not the right fit. Or 2, their messaging isn't that good.
Interesting. So talk to me about now this piece of the spiritual aspect of sales. If I come from a background of any kind of trauma, right? So let's say that he didn't spend enough time with me, or I feel that my mom was super critical, that if I didn't get A's, my parents were disappointed. How does my old trauma play into my ability to make sales?
Well, most of the time, old trauma is still trauma that's present today. Let's take the A's one. That's a good one, right? So I didn't get A's. I was beat up because I didn't get an A. I got a B+, wasn't good enough. right? And the message was always like, unless you get perfection, then you are not accepted or not, by the people that supposed to love you the most, so to speak, right? That's kind of the mental connection we do as children. Like our caretakers, we look up to them in the beginning, we have to, because we're fully reliant on them for our survival, right? So as we grow, we want to serve that because part of us still thinks that we need to survive off that. And we all want love and connection. It's a human need. And so we want love and connection from pleasing those people that, we looked up to, right? I mean, whether that is a parent or a mentor or, maybe it was a coach or a teacher at school, somebody who had this vast influence on our life in an emotional way. We want to keep serving that. And so in the beginning, we need that for our survival. As we go along, we don't need it for our survival, but we don't remember that. We've developed a habit over time of serving that. So let's say we go into a sale, a conversation, and we think it's perfect. And then the person says, no, it's not, I don't like this. Boom, we didn't get the sale. We might feel it as some type of inner pain or some type of feeling or, some type of inner anger that boils up within us, because what we're really saying is, I'm not getting mom and dad's love, or I'm not getting my caretaker's love, but we don't realize that. So it carries on in any situation until we understand how to reframe the association to that component of it. The challenge is most of us are on autopilot as we get older because we're just big kids. Because even at 62, if I get triggered off by something I haven't dealt with, I can easily revert back to when I was literally 12 years old or 6 years old.
How do you catch yourself though? I think that's really the critical part is like, do you have like a system or something that makes you recognize that this is popping up? And then how do we keep it in check?
So remember, we got there by habit, right? So the first step always is awareness, because most people, they know something's going on, but they're not really aware of what the trigger level is. So it's always about the trigger level. Now that trigger level always manifests itself in the feeling in our body or a thought. Sometimes it's both. But like for me, for example, it always starts in the back of my neck. I recognize it. It's like a little creepy tingling feeling. And I have a second one that actually starts in the top of my head. It kind of feels like my forehead's starting to go numb, right? And so when I get that feeling, I know. Right? There's a light bulb that comes on. Now, before, I just thought I always had neck problems or back problems, or I was having a stroke or something that was happening. I wasn't sure, right, in the beginning until I learned how to reframe it. But for other people, it could be a thought. It could be like,
or they break out in sweats, or they have this tone in their voice. A lot of times I hear a tonality where I'm going like, why? What is it about this that's stressing you out?
Right. Yeah. So it could be just like, we're talking like this, and then all of a sudden I get a little more aggressive in my tone or whatever it might be, or I get a little more demure in my tone, right? We always do. Like I have a friend, I mean, man, she could be easily be a model, easily. She's ultimately gorgeous, right? And, her husband is equally, it's like Barbie and Ken. I mean, it's crazy, how beautiful they are as human beings, right? But when she was growing up, her mother was always with her saying, honey, you know what? Why don't you do your hair this way? Because it highlights your face a little better. That makeup shade's good, but I would use this shade. So what does this person do as she gets older? She starts self-doubting herself in her ability, like
to pick the right lipstick color.
One time I was traveling with them on a business trip, and I'm like, hey, we got to go. And she's like, I haven't put my makeup on. I'm like, you don't need makeup. She's like, yeah, I do. And I'll be right down. I run down to their hotel room and I knock on the door. She opens the door, crack, and she goes, you're the only man who's ever going to see me without my makeup, ever, because we're such good friends. I'm like, what about your husband? He's never seen me without makeup.
Oh my God.
Right? So the point being is when these trigger levels happen and we're selling, let's say we get an objection. The objection comes out and we, think, oop, I'm not being perfect. Immediately, something happens. We get a feeling or a thought. Now, those of you who are paying attention to listening to this on how to break it, here's what we got to do. The moment you recognize what that feeling or thought is, we've got to interrupt it. You can interrupt it by asking questions, or you can interrupt it by inviting it in. I invited it in. Now when I go, hey, buddy, welcome. What are you doing?
Thanks for showing up. What are you all about?
Exactly.
Yes.
Next time, bring pasta salad or whatever, right? You can play with this thing, and you can ask a question like, "Am what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, is this even true?" Right? You can ask questions like this to.
I love that question. Is this true?
Yeah, it's an interruption-based question, right? So it's a question to interrupt what's going on, because if we don't interrupt it, wham, we go up to one side of the Y or up the other side of the Y. And let's
Charlie
say
Brown. Wah, wah, wah,
Exactly.
wah, wah. Yes.
The moment you interrupt it, you interrupt it. Now it will give you enough time to start asking questions. And what we want to do is we want to ask qualified questions that actually get us an answer. Like, is this true? Questions of curiosity. I wonder what could be one of the 3 reasons you just showed up right now in the back of my neck. Or I wonder if I'm having this thought about, sometimes it's a flashback, right, to certain things. Like I'm having this thought over and over again. So then we start asking, I wonder why, what could be a few reasons why I'm feeling this way at this moment. That gives us enough time to break the pattern and then ask this question: what is it I really want? What is the outcome that I really want here? Well, I want the CEO to understand my point of view, and I want to understand their point of view. Oh, good. Now what do we do? Let's start asking questions of the CEO.
It really is always about this shifting over to this. And I think the important part is that you really detach yourself from the outcome to say, if I were to do this, this is what I would do it for, and I'd feel good about it. But if it isn't right for me, or if this is not right at this time, then I don't want to do this. And so I spoke to her just before we got on this call today. And then she said to me, our conversations made me realize that I do not want to put money into this problem, but I liked what we had talked about before, and I'd like to consider doing that after the summer holidays. So which one is better, right? So I think that we need to, in this process that you're talking about, the detachment, and the detachment is so much, in the beginning, it's very difficult. I'm going to be really honest here to share this with the Beehive, is in the beginning, you go like, man, I blew the opportunity, and she did raise her hand, and she did say she was ready, and then I wasn't able to close it. But when I look at what feels better for me ultimately, I don't feel good when I feel like I'm talking people into something. I feel better when I have a sale like the one I had a couple of days ago, where I hadn't even gotten to the closing part, and she says, here's my credit card, let's just do it.
A lot of times we don't even need a presentation when we're having the right kind of conversation. So again, traditional sales says you have to have a presentation, right? In your case, you demonstrated you don't, because you're having this conversation and she's saying, hey, let's move forward. So it's, and those are great, detach is a great thing. So when I have a formula for handling objections. The first one, breathe. Relax.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. Don't.
No, you've got to, the moment you get that objection, you got to relax. Third one is detach, right? Because you detach from the outcome. You're not detaching from the conversation, you're detaching from the outcome. And I think that's what you're saying as well. And then get curious, not confrontational. I learned this from Oprah, actually. Oprah Winfrey, she called it surrender, right? Like when she gets in a situation that she's just losing her mind over, she just gives it back to the universe. It's like, you know what? I've done everything I can. It's back to you. Whatever happens, right? First time I heard that, I was like you said, this is really hard to do. It's like, but as now time has gone on, I can do it in an instant. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I have tried these 4 things. This is not working. Obviously, I'm not doing something that's working, and maybe I shouldn't be. So let me give it back to the universe, and if it comes back to me, great. If not, I'm moving on, right?
I love this. I love this a lot. I believe that the surrender in sales is about, and I like this book by Tasha Silver called It's Not Your Money. And she has a prayer in there that has a line in there that says, take away what's not mine so that what is mine can come in. And I find that really is the surrender that we are surrendering to in sales, to say, take away what's not mine, take away who is not mine to serve. so that those who are mine to serve are coming in. And I found that always is such a powerful strategy. And if we teach this, then of course we must live it. And then that means that you then have to abide by the same kind of rules and regulations. Doug, I could talk to you about this forever, but we are at the end of the show. So for somebody who's now listened to this and says, well, this guy is a little bit different in sales than anybody else, how can you help them? Where do we want to send them?
Well, they could send if they want to just have a question, send it into YouMatter, YOUMATTER at ceosalesstrategies.com. We answer all inquiries. People don't believe it. They send a question in and they're like, they answered me. But we recently decided we're going to run out a double your sales, what we call a university, right? So it's a year-long process where I'm playing sales manager for people within this. And what we're doing is we're working on everything, that's related to doubling your sales. So there's 12 core components mathematically that we could talk about, but then there's the skill sets and the mindset and all of the things that we're talking about. I have an ebook on the 1% earner that's free that people could go to. That's www.ceosalesstrategies.com/1PE, 1% earner, and they can download the book. And people have given pretty good response about the book. So those would be the ways. And if they want to check me out, Doug Brown 123, LinkedIn. And that would be the ways I would recommend them to start.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been amazing to have you on the show. And for everybody listening, as you heard, sales is very much like what we talk about on the show, part strategy, part mindset, part. I want to thank everybody for listening to or watching this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. We are very, very grateful that you're here. If you know somebody who's struggling with sales, specifically on today's conversation, please do share this episode with them so that they can get their mind set straight about sales. And as always, thank you very much for being here, and goodbye. So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time.